Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. Not because of the drama, but because of the quiet sadness that seeps through every sentence. It was written by a woman named Claire, 34, who lives in a quiet suburb outside Des Moines, Iowa. She's been married to her husband, Eric, 36, for 8 years. They met back in college, fell in love quickly, and never looked back. Their wedding was simple but beautiful, held in the fall right after Claire finished her graduate program. In the beginning, they were happy, the kind of happy that makes other people jealous. Their world was full of adventure, road trips, camping, late-night talks on rooftops. Life felt endless, and they felt unbreakable. Time passed. They welcomed their first son 6 years ago after months of careful planning. Their second child, another boy, was an unplanned surprise and is now 3. As any parent will tell you, children change everything. Claire's parents and Eric's both live several hours away, so help was rare. Babysitters were hard to come by, and their boys were full of energy, wild and loud and exhausting in the most beautiful ways. Eric's job in logistics was demanding, and his previous boss had a reputation for burning out good employees. He canceled vacations more than once because of last-minute deadlines. There were times Claire felt like she was raising 2 kids alone. They saw each other in passing, 10-minute conversations while making dinner, tired glances exchanged over the heads of their children. Love was still there, buried beneath the fatigue, but it wasn't always enough. Then things started to shift about 6 months ago. Eric's company brought in a new manager. The atmosphere changed. His hours became more predictable, the weight in his shoulders lightened. For the first time in years, they had evenings together again, dinner as a family, glasses of wine after bedtime, TV shows curled up on the couch, but the warmth didn't return with the time. Claire described it like being roommates with someone she used to love. There was no anger, no open resentment, just silence, just distance. She missed him, so she said it out loud. They talked about it more than once. Claire told Eric she felt like a ghost in her own marriage. He agreed. They hired a babysitter, carved out date nights, tried to reconnect, and for a while, it seemed to work. Eric was smiling more. He brought home flowers for the first time in years. Claire allowed herself to hope again. But then, something shifted. About a month ago, she noticed an email pop up on his phone while he was in the shower. It was from someone named Madison. The subject line simply read, "Our trip." She froze. It was probably nothing, she told herself. But when she asked Eric about it, he glanced at his screen, shrugged, and said it was spam. After that night, he never left his phone unattended again. A week later, Claire stumbled across a receipt tucked into his briefcase. It was from a high-end jewelry store. The amount was large enough to make her stomach drop. They weren't struggling financially, but Eric had always been cautious about spending. She had never seen him make a purchase like that without talking to her. When she went to look through his emails, she realized he'd taken his personal laptop to work. That was new. He'd never done that before. Her heart sank deeper. She didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was all a coincidence. Maybe the jewelry was a surprise for her, and she was overthinking. Maybe the email was spam. But that morning, as she was folding laundry, she found something else. His credit card statement, hidden in the back of his sock drawer. Claire sat on the floor and read it in silence. Dozens of purchases, boutiques, lingerie shops, stores she had never stepped foot in. Hundreds of dollars spent. Not a single item had made its way into their home. He was still working late some evenings, still traveling, still smiling, still kissing her on the cheek, still saying "I love you" out of habit. But Claire's heart whispered something else. there's someone else. And all she could think was, how long has this been going on? Was I too distant when the kids were little? Is Madison real? Is she going on this trip with him? Will he leave me for her? Will I be raising 2 little boys all by myself? The answers were hiding behind locked devices and late-night meetings, and Claire was running out of ways to ignore them. Some nights, Claire sat alone in the living room long after the kids had fallen asleep, staring at the silent TV screen with a heart that wouldn't stop racing. Eric was still working late once or twice a week, and though she tried to convince herself it was just part of his job, the uncertainty gnawed at her. What if those nights weren't spent at the office? What if someone else was slipping into the hours she used to call hers? Was she the one who pushed him away when the kids were little and life was overwhelming? Was he planning this trip with someone else? Was Madison even a coworker? Or was she the reason Claire's husband had slowly turned into a stranger? He was buying gifts, jewelry, clothes, lingerie, not for her. At least nothing had made its way into our home. That much she knew. And in Claire's mind, a man doesn't spend that kind of money unless he's already gone, either emotionally or worse, completely. She didn't know his passwords. She didn't have access to his laptop. His phone never left his pocket. Every possible lead toward the truth felt blocked. She could call his office, she thought, confirm whether he was really there when he said he was, but the idea of speaking to anyone sent a tight panic to her chest. She was scared she'd break down before she even got the words out. He was supposed to be home in a few hours, but Claire didn't know what she'd say when he walked through the door. She couldn't picture herself confronting him without crumbling. And the thought of raising their children alone, of sitting at the dinner table without Eric across from her, was like trying to breathe through fog. She didn't want this life. She didn't want to be left behind. Later that evening, after reading through the responses on her online post, her fear only grew heavier. Dozens of strangers were telling her to prepare herself, that the signs were all there, that she needed to stop giving him the benefit of the doubt. Some told her to get her finances in order. Others said to talk to a lawyer. She was overwhelmed. But instead of spiraling further, she picked up the phone and called her older sister, Paige. Paige lived 2.5 hours away, but they had always been close. Paige had known Eric almost as long as Claire had. She was one of the few people Claire trusted completely. As soon as Paige answered, Claire broke down. The words poured out, shaky and raw. She explained the emails, the receipts, the hidden bills. Her voice cracked. She told Paige she was scared, that she didn't want to be alone. She expected comfort. But what she got was something else entirely. "Claire," Paige said, her voice calm, too calm. "It's going to be fine. I need you to take a breath, okay? Calm down. Talk to Eric when he gets home. I promise everything is going to be okay." Then, after a pause, she added, "Hang up the phone. Take a bath. Try to relax. Just wait for him. He'll be home soon. I love you." And then she hung up. Claire sat there, stunned. Her sister had always been the type to listen, to hold her hand, even across the phone line. But this time, it was like Paige hadn't even heard her. Her tone had been soothing, sure, but it also felt like she was brushing Claire off. Something was off. Moments later, Claire updated her post again, telling readers about the strange phone call. The comment section lit up with worry and speculation. Many people pointed out the same thing Claire was now thinking. Paige knew something. Then her phone buzzed. It was a text from Eric. Paige called. "I'm coming home now." Claire's heart flipped. Panic surged. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to look him in the eye and ask the question she'd been too scared to say aloud. She was angry at Paige, furious. Why would she call him without asking Claire first? Why didn't she at least warn her? The walls felt like they were closing in. She collapsed in the kitchen, knees hitting the tile. the weight of uncertainty finally pulling her down. She didn't even hear the front door open. It wasn't until Eric turned the corner and knelt in front of her that she realized he was home. Her body trembled. The tears came again, harder than before. Eric's face twisted with panic. "Claire! Claire, please!" He reached for her, but she stiffened, arms frozen in front of her like a child refusing a hug. She couldn't look at him, couldn't touch him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Please, just listen to me. I'm not cheating, I promise. I need you to hear me." He repeated the words over and over until they finally broke through the storm in her head. "What?" she asked, breathless. And then, slowly, the truth began to unravel. After their recent conversations about feeling distant, Eric had called Paige. He was desperate to fix things, to surprise Claire. Paige had helped him plan a getaway, just the two of them. The emails, the receipts, the hidden bills. They were for her. Claire blinked. It was supposed to be a surprise, a romantic gesture, and she had nearly drowned in fear trying to make sense of it all. Claire couldn't possibly process it all at first. Eric was still kneeling in front of her in the kitchen, his voice soft and steady, unraveling a truth that somehow felt more unbelievable than any of the fears she'd imagined. He told her that the whole plan started with Paige. That after those long, emotional talks about how disconnected things had become, he had reached out to her for help. Paige and her husband had agreed to take the kids for a week. Then, with Paige's encouragement, Eric contacted one of her close friends, a travel agent named Madison. Yes, that Madison. The email Claire had seen, the name that haunted her for weeks. It wasn't a lover, it was a logistics coordinator, someone arranging hotel bookings and dinner reservations. The necklace? Meant for a night out. A small shining surprise to remind Claire that she was still loved, still beautiful, still someone he wanted to romance. The lingerie and designer clothes? For Claire. Eric even took a few of her old pieces with him to get the sizing right. He said he stood in front of racks for over an hour, completely lost, while a kind saleswoman helped him pick out styles she might like. Claire didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The reality hit her like a crashing wave. He had been doing all this for her, and all this time she had been falling apart. She didn't find it romantic, not then, not in that moment. All she could feel was the ache of shame twisting inside her chest. The hours she spent crying on the bathroom floor, the pounding in her head, the anxiety-fueled fear that had taken over her mind and body, it all felt unbearable in hindsight. Paige hadn't expected Claire to find out early. No one had. They wanted it to be a surprise, a beautiful escape to reignite their marriage. But for Claire, the surprise had nearly destroyed her. She had struggled with anxiety before, quiet, manageable, but motherhood had made it worse. Sleepless nights, constant worry, a relentless sense of not being enough. This, however, had been the worst spiral she had ever experienced. Eric didn't tell her everything right away, just enough to stop the storm. But once she calmed down, after she stopped crying, after her breathing steadied, he showed her everything. The emails, the travel itinerary, the receipts. And for the first time in what felt like years, they sat side by side on the couch and dreamed together. It should have felt like a turning point. Maybe it was, but Claire couldn't fully enjoy the relief. At one point in the middle of the conversation, she excused herself and ran to the bathroom. She had cried so hard, with such force, that she vomited a little on the linoleum floor. A humiliating moment, but oddly fitting. It was as if her body was purging the fear she had been carrying for weeks. She apologized, of course. Eric didn't seem to mind. He held her hair back and helped her clean up. They talked until long past midnight. There were moments of warmth, even laughter as they imagined what the trip would be like. But Claire couldn't ignore the nagging thoughts circling at the edge of her relief. Why didn't anyone just tell her? Why did Paige let it go this far? Apparently, when Claire called her in distress, Paige had gone into a quiet panic. She knew Claire's anxiety, knew how deep it could run. So she called Eric, warned him, told him to come home before things fell apart. And in a way, things had fallen apart. Claire wasn't angry, not really, just tired. Too tired to be upset. Too relieved to yell. Still, something inside her felt unsettled. She kept thinking about how quickly she had unraveled, how helpless she felt in the face of uncertainty. Was she always like this? Or had the years of motherhood and emotional distance hollowed her out without her noticing? Some strangers online had thrown around the word codependent. She didn't want to admit it, but maybe they were right. Maybe she had been leaning on Eric too hard for too long. Maybe she had lost pieces of herself somewhere between diaper changes and lonely evenings. But those were thoughts for another day. Today the house was quiet again. The boys were playing with blocks on the floor, the sun poured through the kitchen window, and for the first time in weeks, Claire felt like she could breathe. The trip was still happening. The surprise had been ruined, but the meaning behind it remained. Eric was trying, and she still loved him. That had to count for something. She thanked the people who had reached out with advice, comfort, and even criticism. Their words, though hard to read, had guided her through the fog. And if she could offer one thing in return, it would be this. Sometimes the things we fear most aren't real, but the pain they leave behind is, and that pain deserves to be felt. So feel it, then move forward, because maybe, just maybe, there's still something beautiful waiting on the other side. After Claire and Eric's story, there's another tale I can't forget, one that's quieter, older, but just as heavy. His name is Jonah, a 45-year-old man living in Kansas City, Missouri. For the past decade, he's been working as a senior consultant for a multinational tech firm, a job that has taken him around the world. Shanghai, Paris, Cape Town, Buenos Aires. He's seen more cities than he can count, and more hotel rooms than he'd care to remember. But despite all the flights and foreign languages, Jonah never remarried. He dated, sometimes casually, sometimes more seriously. Beautiful, brilliant women, each one kind in their own way. But none of them stayed, or maybe he never let them stay. After the divorce, something inside him hardened. He told himself marriage wasn't for him, that he was happier without the risk. And for the most part, that was true. He had a good life, a comfortable apartment, a strong career, no one to answer to. But sometimes, especially around the holidays, the silence in his home felt unbearable. Joy felt like something that belonged to other people. A few months ago, Jonah decided it was time to stop moving. He transferred to a permanent stateside role and settled into a quieter rhythm in Kansas City. No more airports, no more waking up in unfamiliar time zones. One quiet Saturday morning, he sat alone in a corner booth of a local diner, sipping black coffee and scrolling through news headlines on his phone, Facebook, Reddit, the usual. The diner buzzed softly with the voices of couples and families. It was the kind of morning he had always imagined he'd one day share with someone. Then he heard it, a voice behind him. Jonah? It was soft, uncertain, but familiar enough to make his heart stop. He turned and froze. There, standing just a few feet away, was Laurel, his ex-wife. He hadn't seen her in nearly 6 years. They had met in college in Denver and married a year after graduation. Their love had been effortless in the beginning, the kind of bond that made sense in the bones. And then in 2016, it all came crashing down. Laurel had been having an affair with a colleague. Not just a one-time mistake, but a relationship, something she called love. Within 3 months, Their marriage was over. Jonah had never recovered from it fully. He buried his grief in work, in airports, in the distraction of distance. And now here she was, 2,000 miles away from where their lives had ended, standing in front of him like no time had passed. He barely managed a hi. She smiled, a little nervous, and said he looked amazing. He told her the same, because it was true. Laurel looked softer somehow, older in the ways that mattered. There were lines on her face, but also a quiet strength in her eyes he didn't remember from before. She asked if he had time to talk. He said yes. They ended up sitting in that booth for over 2 hours, and later walked slowly through a nearby park. They talked about old friends, where life had taken them, and all the countries Jonah had visited. But they carefully danced around the one subject they both knew was waiting between them, until finally she asked, "Did you ever remarry?" He shook his head. "No, once was enough." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said softly, "I'm so sorry, Jonah, for everything. You didn't deserve it. I was selfish, and it's haunted me ever since." He didn't respond right away. Then he told her what he had told himself so many times before, that she had fallen in love with someone else, and he couldn't stop her from doing that. He had wanted her to be happy. And then he asked, "Were you?" She laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound, more like a bitter breath trying to escape. Laurel told him that the man she left Jonah for had cheated on her 2 years into their marriage, that they fought constantly, that he left without warning. And when her heart broke, all she could think about was the pain she had caused Jonah. It crushed her, she said. She spiraled, lost herself in drinking, impulsive decisions, and months of darkness, until she finally sought help, therapy, accountability, change. Eventually, she left Denver and moved to Kansas City to be near her aunt. After a second failed marriage and the wreckage of her choices, she needed something different. Jonah believed her. She seemed different, calmer, more present. Eventually, he had to leave to meet friends. They exchanged numbers, promised to talk again. And they did. Coffee turned into weekly chats, long walks, familiar laughter. The pieces of their history slowly resurfacing. Jonah knew what Laurel wanted. He could see it in her eyes. She still had feelings. She wanted him to feel the same. And part of him did. There was something in her presence that made his chest tighten, a familiarity he hadn't found in anyone since. It wasn't just memory, it was something alive, chemistry maybe, or something deeper. He wanted to hold her, to kiss her, but he hadn't yet, because what held him back wasn't pride, it was fear. She hadn't been a fling, she was the love of his life, the person who had shattered him in ways no one else ever could. And now, with a second chance sitting in front of him, all he could think about was, what if she broke me again? He wanted to fall, but he didn't know if he could survive the landing. The comments came in quickly after Jonah shared his story. Many were heartfelt, others were blunt, even brutal. One person wrote, "Getting back with an ex is like drinking poison and hoping it tastes different the second time. You divorced for a reason. Don't forget the pain." Another said, "2 divorces before 35 is a red flag, not a coincidence. If she hadn't been betrayed herself, she probably wouldn't have reached out. You were her backup, not her soulmate." It stung to read those words, even though Jonah understood why they were being said. His own fears mirrored them. "You only crossed her mind after she was broken the same way she broke you," someone else commented. "Your life took off after she left. Hers fell apart. Why wouldn't she want to come back to the one person who once loved her unconditionally? There was no shortage of warnings. Don't confuse chemistry with healing. She hurt you once. She can hurt you again. And love doesn't mean you should forget. But then there were others, softer, more forgiving. Fear isn't always bad, one commenter said. It's there to protect you. But sometimes the risk is worth it. Maybe she's changed. Maybe you have too. Another simply wrote, "She was the love of your life." That's not something you bury easily. Jonah read every word. He didn't respond, but he let them sit with him. And after weeks of uncertainty, of slow walks and quiet conversations, he made his choice. He updated the post. He had hesitated to share it, knowing the backlash it might bring, but the truth deserved space. Over the holidays, Jonah and Laurel got remarried. Quietly. Just them. A courthouse and a soft snowfall outside the windows. And now, they were expecting a child. Jonah acknowledged the risks. He didn't deny the past, but he also didn't want to live frozen in it. He wrote, "She's not the same person she used to be, and neither am I. We're not kids anymore. We've both done the work. We've both sat with the pain we caused and endured. This isn't the naive love we had in our 20s. This is something slower, deeper, more deliberate." He also addressed the accusation that Laurel had somehow tracked him down. He wrote, "She didn't. She had moved here before I did. It was pure coincidence, if you believe in that sort of thing. We ran into each other at a diner in a city neither of us had ever lived in before. We were both single. We hadn't spoken in years. If that's not fate, I don't know what is." He didn't ask for approval. He didn't need it. But he ended the post with a quiet piece of advice. Don't close your heart. You never know who might walk into your life when you're least expecting it. Jonah's story touches something deeply human, the fear of being hurt again, and the quiet hope that people can change. It's not about fairy tales or blind forgiveness. It's about recognizing growth, both in ourselves and others, and deciding whether a second chance is healing or self-sabotage. In real life, not every reunion leads to happiness, and not every apology deserves another try. That's why, if you've ever been betrayed, it's important to step back and look honestly at the relationship. Was the pain caused by a pattern or a mistake? Has the other person done the real, hard work of change, or are they just lonely? Do you want them back because they've changed, or because you miss who they were? If you're considering reconnecting with someone who hurt you, protect your peace first. Don't ignore the past, but don't let it dictate your future either. Talk to a therapist. Set boundaries. Take your time. And remember, forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Other times, the bravest thing is letting someone in, knowing full well what they're capable of. Only you can decide which is which.